In the heart of India's dry plains, where the wind stirs the red dust into faint clouds, lies a city frozen in time. Fatehpur Sikri, a city built not over centuries, but almost overnight, as the crowning glory of the Mughal Empire under Emperor Akbar. Yet, despite its grandeur, this capital was abandoned within just a few decades. No fire, no conquest, no rebellion, simply left behind, a perfectly preserved ghost of imperial ambition. How could one of the most powerful empires on earth walk away from its own seat of power? That is the mystery of Fatehpur Sikri. Akbar, a young emperor with a vision to unify an empire spanning millions of souls, sought more than power. He sought legacy. Fatehpur Sikri was not just a capital, it was a statement. Built with crimson sandstone that glowed under the harsh sun, the city reflected both authority and artistry. Palaces rose with meticulous symmetry, courtyards stretched endlessly, and the city's mosques and halls projected an aura of permanence. Every stone, every arch, and every corridor was designed to demonstrate that Akbar's reign was not just temporal, it was destined. Yet, behind the stone and mortar lay a story of faith. Akbar had visited the Sufi Saint Salim Chishti, a holy man whose prophecy promised him a son. When the heir arrived, Akbar's devotion was palpable. Fatehpur Sikri became entwined with this mystical blessing, a city built not just for governance but for spiritual vindication. It was a place where faith and imperial ambition intersected, a physical manifestation of prophecy and destiny. The scale of construction was staggering. Workers numbered in the tens of thousands. Artisans carved intricate patterns, and engineers moved massive sandstone blocks with ingenuity that still impresses modern historians. Within years, the city was complete, a fully functioning capital with courts, living quarters, gardens, and monumental halls for audience and ceremony. It was designed to awe visitors, subordinates, and rivals alike, projecting the unassailable power of the Mughal dynasty. Life in Fatehpur Sikri was as ceremonial as it was controlled. Every procession, every audience, and every religious observance reinforced the emperor's authority. Yet the city's brilliance could not conceal its fragility. Despite Akbar's vision, the land itself began to protest. Water was scarce. Wells and reservoirs could barely sustain the population, and the monsoon rains, inconsistent as they were, could not rescue the city from the desert's demands. The grandeur of Fatehpur Sikri collided with the realities of its environment, and the first cracks in the empire's plan appeared. By the time Akbar's campaigns stretched the empire's borders far and wide, Fatehpur Sikri's logistical challenges had become insurmountable. It was strategically awkward, distant from critical centres of trade and governance. The court's attention shifted, and the city that had been a symbol of prophecy and power began to empty. One day the city was vibrant and alive, the next it was silent. There was no documented siege, no rebellion, no catastrophe, just the quiet departure of an empire that had outgrown its own creation. And yet, even in abandonment, Fatehpur Sikri refused to decay. Unlike ruined cities consumed by fire or war, it remained intact, preserved in the arid air of Rajasthan. Its palaces, mosques, and courtyards stood untouched, whispering stories of ambition, faith, and human endeavour. Over the centuries, myths grew around the city, curses, divine displeasure, astrological failures. But the truth is more human and more remarkable. It was an empire's quiet retreat from a place it could not sustain. Today, Fatehpur Sikri stands as a monument to both the heights and limits of imperial power. It is a city that speaks of vision, devotion, and the fragile balance between ambition and reality. Walking its deserted corridors, one can almost feel the echo of the past, the footsteps of courtiers, the chants of the faithful, the shadow of an emperor who sought to bend destiny itself. Fatehpur Sikri is more than a city. It is a question, a mystery, and a warning etched in stone. It reminds us that even the mightiest empires can abandon their greatest triumphs, leaving behind only echoes in the dust. At the height of his power, Emperor Akbar was more than a ruler. He was a visionary shaping the very destiny of the Indian subcontinent. Ascending the throne at just 13, he had transformed from a young, inexperienced prince into a masterful strategist and an innovator in governance, culture, and faith. By the time Fatehpur Sikri came into his imagination, Akbar had already solidified control over a vast and diverse empire, stretching from the plains of the Ganges to the deserts of Rajasthan. Yet, his ambition went beyond mere conquest. He sought unity, not just of territories, but of peoples, beliefs, and legacies, a dream that would be etched into every stone of the city he would build. Fatehpur Sikri was never intended as just another administrative hub. It was a physical embodiment of Akbar's vision, a city where imperial power and spiritual destiny would converge. Its foundation was closely tied to the Sufi Saint Salim Chishti, whose prophecy promised the emperor an heir. Akbar's devotion to this divine prediction transformed the city into a personal and political statement. Each mosque, palace, and hall was a testament to the intertwining of his spiritual faith with the pragmatic mechanics of empire. In Akbar's mind, the city was not just a capital, it was destiny made tangible. The emperor's ambition extended beyond governance into the realm of architecture, urban planning, and symbolism. He envisioned Fatehpur Sikri as a stage on which his rule could be performed and observed. The city was meticulously designed with wide ceremonial avenues, grand plazas, and elevated platforms where Akbar could hold audiences that reinforced both awe and obedience. Each structure was carefully aligned, not only for aesthetic harmony, but to project control and omnipresence. The planning of the city reflected a ruler who understood that power was as much about perception as it was about administration. Akbar's court, which would relocate to Fatehpur Sikri, was a microcosm of the empire itself. Scholars, artists, and diplomats from across Asia gathered to witness the emperor's vision. Here, debates on religion, philosophy, and governance were not just tolerated, they were encouraged. Akbar saw Fatehpur Sikri as a living experiment in statecraft, a place where innovation and tradition coexisted. He invited intellectuals from Hindu, Islamic, and Christian traditions to contribute to the cultural and religious life of the city, attempting to create a synthesis that would reflect the unity of his empire. Yet, even as the city rose in glory, Akbar's ambition was inseparable from control. The design of Fatehpur Sikri allowed the emperor to oversee every aspect of life within the walls, from the movement of courtiers to the rituals of daily devotion. Gardens were arranged not only for beauty, but to direct attention and influence behavior. Roads and gates were constructed to regulate the flow of people, ensuring that power remained visible and centralized. Fatehpur Sikri was as much a psychological instrument as it was a city, a tool through which Akbar could shape not only the landscape, but the very consciousness of those who lived within it. Even today, walking through Fatehpur Sikri, one senses the magnitude of Akbar's vision. The city's imposing walls, soaring domes, and intricate carvings tell a story of an emperor who sought to bend both destiny and history to his will. It was a city meant to impress, to inspire, and to endure, reflecting the genius of a ruler whose ambition knew no bounds. Yet, in its perfection lies the subtle foreshadowing of its vulnerability, as the very desert that framed its beauty would eventually challenge its permanence. Fatehpur Sikri, in every stone and corridor, is a portrait of Akbar, brilliant, commanding, ambitious, and inexorably tied to the human limits of power. Long before Fatehpur Sikri rose from the sun-baked plains of Rajasthan, the young Emperor Akbar sought guidance from a source far removed from the corridors of power. He turned to the Sufi Saint Salim Chishti, a man revered for his wisdom, holiness, and alleged ability to foresee destiny. Akbar had already established himself as a formidable ruler, consolidating vast territories across northern India. But the absence of an heir threatened both the continuity of his dynasty and the legitimacy of his reign. When news of the saint's prophecy reached him, that he would be blessed with a son who would secure his lineage, Akbar's vision for the future took on a new, almost divine significance. The emperor's journey to seek Chishti was not merely ceremonial. Crossing arid plains and harsh terrain, Akbar arrived at the saint's humble dwelling, where the simplicity of the environment contrasted sharply with the opulence of his court. Inside, Chishti's presence exuded calm authority, a spiritual power that transcended material wealth. The prophecy was not simply a blessing, it was a declaration that the emperor's rule had the endorsement of the divine. Akbar, who had always been both politically savvy and deeply curious about spiritual matters, accepted the vision wholeheartedly. From that moment, the city he would build would be intertwined with faith, destiny, and legitimacy. Fatehpur Sikri was conceived as a city consecrated by prophecy. The choice of location for the city reflected the mystical rather than the practical. The plains near Chishti's dwelling, elevated yet harsh, became the spiritual and geographic heart of Fatehpur Sikri. Despite the scarcity of water, extreme temperatures, and isolation from established trade routes, Akbar was determined to construct a capital that bore the mark of divine favour. Every stone laid, every courtyard carved, and every ceremonial hall erected was imbued with meaning, connecting the emperor's political authority to spiritual destiny. This was not a city built for convenience or strategy. It was built to manifest the prophecy itself. As the foundations were laid, the convergence of faith and imperial ambition became apparent. Palaces rose around the saint's tomb, mosques and public halls echoed with the prayers of officials and pilgrims, and the streets buzzed with artisans whose work honoured both beauty and devotion. The tomb of Salim Chishti, even today, remains the spiritual nucleus of the city, a white marble contrast to the red sandstone palaces that surround it. Akbar's careful orchestration of religious reverence alongside political authority exemplified how belief could reinforce governance, creating a city where legitimacy was derived as much from divine favour as from imperial might. Yet Fatehpur Sikri also illustrates the inherent tension between ideal and reality. Building a capital around prophecy demanded faith, but the desert's challenges were relentless. Water was limited, monsoons unreliable, and the soil unforgiving. The very choice to honour prophecy over practicality foreshadowed the difficulties the city would later face. Nevertheless, Akbar's determination to manifest the prophecy shows the complex interplay between human ambition and spiritual conviction. The city became a living experiment in power, belief, and legitimacy, a place where the lines between divine blessing and imperial strategy blurred. Walking through Fatehpur Sikri today, one can almost feel the weight of that prophecy. The red sandstone palaces rise beside the gleaming white tomb of Salim Chishti, a silent testament to a moment when faith shaped the destiny of an empire. Pilgrims still come to pray, their footsteps echoing alongside those of courtiers and rulers long gone. The city, in its beauty and its abandonment, stands as a monument to the power of belief. It reminds us that sometimes the most enduring human creations are not the ones born of logic or convenience, but of faith, hope, and the desire to touch the divine. Fatehpur Sikri exists as a bridge between history and myth, a testament to an emperor who believed that destiny could be carved in stone. The story of Fatehpur Sikri is not just one of vision, it is a tale of unprecedented ambition and remarkable execution. Once Akbar had committed to the site near the Sufi St. Salim Chishti, the question became how to transform a barren stretch of desert into a capital worthy of an empire. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. Within a single generation, artisans, engineers, and labourers turned dusty plains into a sprawling city that rivaled the grandeur of any contemporary capital in the world. It was a feat of logistics, planning, and sheer human will that still astonishes historians today. Red sandstone, quarried from nearby hills, became the material of imperial authority. Palaces rose with soaring walls, intricate carvings, and delicate latticework that caught the light in patterns of extraordinary beauty. Each structure was carefully measured and aligned, reflecting a vision not merely for living spaces but for an empire on display. The Diwan-e-Am, or Hall of Public Audience, was built to awe visitors and subjects alike, its columns and arches framing the emperor in a position of undeniable authority. Across vast courtyards, gardens were laid out in geometric precision, fountains and water channels designed not just for decoration, but to create a rhythm of life that reinforced order and hierarchy. The speed of construction was staggering. Tens of thousands of labourers and artisans worked simultaneously, transporting massive stone blocks, carving intricate designs, and assembling massive halls with painstaking accuracy. The city was designed as a statement. Every palace, mosque, and public square broadcast the empire's wealth, taste, and power. Unlike cities that grew organically over decades or centuries, Fatehpur Sikri was planned from the start to impress, to intimidate, and to last. Its roads, gates, and plazas followed a calculated pattern, ensuring both efficiency and spectacle. The layout made the emperor's presence unavoidable, his authority visible from almost every corner of the city. The combination of architectural innovation and urban planning made Fatehpur Sikri a marvel of its time. Akbar drew inspiration from Persian, Hindu, and indigenous Indian styles, creating a fusion that was uniquely Mughal. Delicate jali screens filtered sunlight into cooling patterns across palace corridors. Courtyards were proportioned to accommodate thousands of subjects during ceremonies, while private chambers offered opulence and intimacy for the emperor and his family. Even in the detail of door handles, wall carvings, and fountains, the artistry communicated power, faith, and cultural sophistication. Fatehpur Sikri was not just a city, it was a living, breathing symbol of imperial ideology. Despite the harsh desert environment, the construction progressed with astonishing precision. Engineers designed water systems, roads, and defensive walls with foresight, attempting to overcome the challenges of climate and terrain. Yet, the grandeur of the city was deliberately prioritized over practicality. Its scale, symmetry, and beauty sent a clear message. This was the center of a powerful empire, a city meant to stand as a testament to human ambition and imperial authority for generations to come. Every wall, arch, and courtyard was meant to impress not just contemporaries, but history itself. Walking through Fatehpur Sikri today, one can still feel the energy of its rapid creation. The red sandstone glows in the sun, courtyards stretch endlessly, and columns rise in perfect alignment as if the city had been scripted in stone. Even in its eventual abandonment, the precision, beauty, and audacity of its construction endure. Fatehpur Sikri reminds us that empires are built not only through armies and decrees, but also through vision, artistry, and the sheer determination to turn desert into a stage for power. It is a city born of ambition, immortalized in stone, and forever echoing the voice of an emperor who sought to leave a mark on the world that time could not erase. Once the palaces and halls of Fatehpur Sikri rose from the desert, the city became a stage for the intricate choreography of imperial life. Akbar's court was not merely a place of governance, it was a theatre of power, meticulously designed to display authority, impress visitors, and subtly enforce obedience. Every stone, every courtyard, every arch carried a message. The emperor's presence dominated the city, even when he was physically absent. The daily rhythms of court life were as precise and calculated as the architecture itself. The city's central courtyards were alive with ceremonies that blended political necessity with ritual spectacle. Ambassadors from distant lands, local rulers, and envoys were received in halls where columns framed Akbar as both judge and sovereign. Public audiences, held in the vast Diwani-Am, demonstrated transparency of power but also reinforced hierarchy. Subjects were reminded that while they could witness the emperor, they were also constantly under his watchful eye. This combination of visibility and ritual was a subtle yet powerful method of control, a psychological design embedded into the very fabric of the city. Within the private chambers of Fatehpur Sikri, the lives of royal women added another layer to the politics of the court. Palaces were arranged to provide seclusion and protection, yet they were also arenas for influence. Women of the royal household, from queens to concubines, participated in diplomacy, patronage, and court intrigue. Their presence, though often hidden from the public eye, shaped decisions, alliances, and the subtle power structures that kept the empire balanced. The architecture of Fatehpur Sikri, with its screened windows, inner courtyards, and secluded chambers, facilitated these layers of influence while maintaining the city's strict hierarchy. Daily life in the court combined ceremony with control in ways both grand and intimate. Musicians, dancers, and poets performed in ornate halls, filling the city with culture while reinforcing Akbar's role as patron and authority. Courtiers and ministers observed strict etiquette, Each bow, each gesture was a reminder of the emperor's dominance. Even the design of streets and gates dictated movement, ensuring that every visitor, envoy and official experienced the city on the emperor's terms. In Fatehpur Sikri, architecture and protocol were inseparable, forming a seamless system of power that could be read and felt by anyone who entered. Akbar's personal influence extended into every corner of the city. Gardens were not merely decorative, they symbolized order and harmony under his rule. Fountains and water channels controlled flow and rhythm, reflecting both the aesthetics and the authority of the state. Every interaction, from informal discussions in courtyards to formal addresses in grand halls, was structured to maintain a balance between awe and loyalty. Even leisure and cultural gatherings reinforced the narrative of a ruler who combined wisdom, generosity, and absolute control. Fatehpur Sikri was more than a residence. It was an instrument of governance, a carefully orchestrated environment designed to embody power in every aspect of daily life. Walking through Fatehpur Sikri today, one can still sense the echoes of its former inhabitants. Empty halls, sunlit courtyards, and carved screens hint at the rituals, ceremonies, and subtle manipulations that once governed the lives of thousands. The city was a microcosm of the empire itself, magnificent, precise, and unyielding. It stands as a reminder that authority is rarely only about force. It is also about spectacle, influence, and the unseen mechanisms that guide behavior. Fatehpur Sikri was built to impress, to awe, and to control, and in its silence it still speaks of a court where marble and red sandstone were instruments of power as much as artistry. Fatehpur Sikri was more than a capital. It was a laboratory of ideas, where the ambitions of an emperor intersected with the profound questions of faith and governance. Akbar, known for his intellectual curiosity and openness, sought to unify an empire that spanned hundreds of ethnicities and religious traditions. From Hindus and Muslims to Jains and Christians, his subjects represented a dizzying array of beliefs. Instead of imposing conformity, Akbar embarked on an audacious experiment, the creation of Dini Ilahi, or the religion of God, a spiritual philosophy that blended elements of multiple faiths into a code of ethics and loyalty. Fatehpur Sikri became the crucible in which this radical vision was tested. Within the marble halls and courtyards of the city, Akbar hosted debates and discussions with theologians, philosophers, and scholars from across the subcontinent. Temples, mosques, and churches coexisted as spaces of inquiry, reflecting his desire to harmonize religious diversity. Dini Ilahi was less about dogma and more about cultivating moral virtue, loyalty to the emperor, and spiritual unity. It rejected orthodox constraints, emphasizing compassion, honesty, and self-discipline, while encouraging followers to embrace elements from multiple traditions. For Akbar, Fatehpur Sikri was a physical embodiment of this philosophy, a city where spiritual openness, intellectual discourse, and imperial authority were inseparable. The emperor's experiment was revolutionary, and not everyone welcomed it. Conservative factions within the court and religious establishment viewed Dini Ilahi as a threat to orthodoxy and the social order. By blending elements of Islam, Hinduism, Jainism, and even Christianity, Akbar challenged centuries of entrenched beliefs, yet he remained resolute. Through public rituals, philosophical assemblies, and personal example, he sought to demonstrate that loyalty and morality could transcend sectarian divisions. Fatehpur Sikri, in all its grandeur, became both the stage and the laboratory for this audacious vision. The city itself mirrored the philosophical ambitions of the emperor. Architecturally, it blended styles from multiple cultural traditions, fusing Persian arches, Hindu motifs, and indigenous Indian designs. In doing so, Fatehpur Sikri was not just a backdrop for debate, it was an active participant in the experiment, communicating inclusivity and harmony through stone and space. Ceremonies in the city, from public audiences to private gatherings, were imbued with symbolic meaning, reinforcing the emperor's message that faith could be inclusive, practical, and aligned with governance. Every courtyard and hall was an extension of Dini Ilahi's principles, a living testament to Akbar's vision of spiritual and political fusion. Yet, Even as the city flourished and the philosophical experiment gained momentum, underlying tensions persisted. Skeptics whispered that the emperor's ambitions overstepped the bounds of tradition, that Din-i-Ilahi was an affront to established authorities, and that Fatehpur Sikri itself might be a dangerous symbol of overreach. These undercurrents hinted at the fragility of the city's idealized world. The emperor's genius lay in his ability to balance inspiration with control, but the desert around the city and the divisions within the court reminded him that even the most visionary ideas must contend with reality. Walking through Fatehpur Sikri today, one senses the echoes of those debates and the courage of a ruler willing to experiment with faith on a grand scale. The city's fusion of architectural styles, its harmonious courtyards, and the solemn beauty of its mosques and temples tell the story of an emperor seeking unity, not through conquest, but through understanding. Akbar's experiment was radical, ambitious, and, for many, unsettling, but it left an indelible mark on the history of India. Fatehpur Sikri remains a testament to the vision of a ruler who dared to imagine a world in which faith, reason, and power could coexist in unprecedented harmony. Fatehpur Sikri, for all its grandeur and meticulous planning, was not immune to the harsh realities of its environment. Beneath the perfection of red sandstone palaces and marble halls, the first cracks in the city's dream began to appear. The desert was beautiful but unforgiving, and the grand vision of a capital consecrated by prophecy and imperial ambition now had to contend with practical constraints. Water, the lifeblood of any city, became an ever-present challenge. Wells and reservoirs strained to meet the demands of thousands of inhabitants, and the monsoon rains were often unpredictable, leaving the city vulnerable during dry seasons. The scarcity of water was not just inconvenient, it was a structural flaw that foreshadowed the difficulties to come. Food supply and logistics added another layer of complexity. Fatehpur Sikri had been constructed quickly and with grandeur in mind, but the surrounding plains could not easily support a city of its scale. Caravans brought grain, livestock, and goods from distant regions, but the distance and arid terrain meant that the city was constantly dependent on fragile supply lines. Even routine shortages could disrupt life in the court and among common citizens, creating tension and highlighting the contrast between the city's ostentatious appearance and the precariousness of its existence. The very features that made Fatehpur Sikri a marvel, its remoteness, its size, its beauty, also made it difficult to sustain. Political friction began to emerge as well. Akbar's ambitious religious and social experiments, while visionary, unsettled segments of the nobility and religious authorities. Some courtiers and local officials viewed the city's reliance on prophecy and spiritual symbolism as a distraction from practical governance. Resistance was subtle at first, a hesitant compliance, a quiet questioning of rituals, but it was enough to hint at the fragility of centralized authority. In a city designed to showcase absolute power, even minor dissent threatened the carefully constructed order. Fatehpur Sikri's very precision, the clarity of its hierarchy and ceremonial choreography, made any hint of instability highly visible. The combined effect of environmental, logistical, and political pressures began to erode the illusion of miracle. What had once seemed a city of destiny and divine favor was increasingly experienced as a city of burdens. Courtyards that once thrummed with life and ceremony could no longer hide the strain of limited resources. Palaces, while architecturally perfect, could not solve the problems of water shortage or supply bottlenecks. Even the elaborate gardens and fountains, symbols of harmony and control, reminded residents of what the desert could not provide. The perfection of Fatehpur Sikri was showing its human limits, yet the city remained a spectacle, a monument to ambition and ingenuity. The cracks were subtle, not catastrophic, but they were undeniable. Walking through Fatehpur Sikri, one could sense the tension between vision and reality. The brilliant planning of the streets, the artistry of the arches, and the deliberate placement of courtyards all reflected the genius of Akbar, yet all existed atop a precarious balance of survival and control. Fatehpur Sikri was still magnificent, still awe-inspiring, but the desert was beginning to assert its presence, quietly reminding all who dwelled there that even the most ambitious human creation must contend with the forces of nature, logistics, and politics. The first shadows of doubt were cast, hinting that even destiny, when constructed in stone, has its limits. Amid all the grandeur of Fatehpur Sikri, one invisible enemy quietly dictated the fate of the city: water. While red sandstone walls rose and marble halls gleamed, the lifeblood of any city, the ability to sustain human life, remained precariously insufficient. Akbar's vision had been vast, ambitious, and even divine in its conception, but the desert on which it was built demanded a concession that no architecture, ceremony, or military might could fully overcome. For a capital designed to host tens of thousands of residents, courtiers, soldiers, and pilgrims, water scarcity was not an inconvenience, it was a structural threat. Fatehpur Sikri's designers tried to anticipate the problem. Ingenious systems of stepwells, reservoirs, and channels were constructed to capture monsoon rains and distribute water throughout the city. These feats of engineering were extraordinary for the 16th century, reflecting both the ingenuity and ambition of the Mughal administration. Yet the scale of the city continually outpaced the capacity of these systems. Reservoirs ran dry during the scorching summer months, and the monsoon, so critical to replenishing supplies, could be unreliable. Even minor delays or shortages could ripple across the city, affecting drinking water, irrigation for gardens, and sanitation in the palaces and public spaces. The harsh reality of climate imposed its limits with relentless consistency. Rajasthan's plains, beautiful in their starkness, were unforgiving. Temperatures soared in the dry months, and dust storms swept through the city, eroding the carefully built structures and complicating maintenance. The soil could not naturally support the population, and the effort to bring water from distant sources required extraordinary logistics. Caravans hauling water or supplies faced treacherous terrain, and the time and manpower required added strain on the very system designed to make the city livable. No matter the skill of engineers or the devotion of labourers, the desert's realities were unyielding. Even Akbar, whose vision had orchestrated the convergence of faith, politics, and architecture, could not fully solve the problem. The city's water shortage created subtle but persistent pressure on daily life. Courtiers and commoners alike faced limitations in hygiene, cooking, and ceremonial functions. Fountains and gardens, once symbols of imperial authority and control, began to lose their vibrancy. The very features that had conveyed abundance and harmony were now reminders of scarcity and vulnerability. Fatehpur Sikri, conceived as a city of destiny, was increasingly defined by its inability to meet the most basic human need. The limits of water availability reveal why Fatehpur Sikri's abandonment was not simply political or symbolic, it was practical. An empire may endure through armies, diplomacy, and religious ideology, but a city cannot function without a sustainable water supply. The genius of Mughal architecture, the precision of urban planning, and even the favour of prophecy could not substitute for environmental reality. Engineers and architects, for all their skill, faced an impossible equation: a city of extraordinary ambition built in a desert with resources incapable of sustaining it. Walking through Fatehpur Sikri today, one can still sense the shadow of this problem. Empty reservoirs, cracked channels, and silent fountains speak louder than any inscription or carving. The city remains a monument to vision, artistry, and political ambition, but it is also a testament to the limits imposed by nature. Fatehpur Sikri is a reminder that no matter how grand the human endeavour, the most fundamental laws, like the availability of water, remain beyond control. The desert, not armies or intrigue, rendered the final verdict on the capital that Akbar had dreamed into existence. As Fatehpur Sikri rose to prominence, the Mughal Empire was rapidly expanding, stretching its authority across northern and central India. Akbar, ever the visionary, found himself drawn into a series of military campaigns aimed at consolidating territories, securing trade routes, and defending the empire's borders from both internal rebellions and rival powers. While the city shimmered with marble halls, gardens, and courtyards designed to impress, it began to reveal its strategic limitations. Its location, chosen for spiritual significance rather than military pragmatism, increasingly proved awkward in the context of an empire on the move. The emperor's campaigns demanded mobility and rapid response, yet Fatehpur Sikri, situated on the semi-arid plains of Rajasthan, was far from the geographic centres of conflict. Armies had to traverse long distances across difficult terrain, stretching supply lines and delaying reinforcements. Meanwhile, the city's isolation meant that it was poorly positioned to serve as a hub for intelligence, coordination, or defence. Akbar's absence, often months at a time, left the city's administration reliant on deputies and courtiers whose loyalty, while generally steadfast, could not match the guiding presence of the emperor himself. The very grandeur that defined Fatehpur Sikri, the imposing walls, ceremonial courtyards, and ornamental gardens, offered little advantage in practical military strategy. Beyond logistics, political pressures mounted from both within and beyond the empire. Neighbouring rulers and regional powers observed the Mughal consolidation with a mixture of apprehension and opportunism. While some submitted to Akbar's authority, others resisted, taking advantage of gaps in communication and the emperor's extended absences. The military focus required to secure these frontiers diverted attention from domestic administration and exacerbated challenges within the city itself, from resource management to political friction. Fatehpur Sikri, once a shining emblem of imperial strength, began to feel vulnerable to both internal strain and external pressures. The strategic awkwardness of the city also highlighted a tension between spiritual ambition and imperial practicality. Akbar had chosen the location to honour Salim Chishti's prophecy, to manifest divine favour, and to create a capital that embodied his vision of power and faith. Yet, as campaigns demanded greater mobility and the empire expanded in multiple directions, the spiritual advantages could not compensate for logistical constraints. The further the Mughal armies pushed into distant territories, the less relevant Fatehpur Sikri became as a centre of command, supply and governance. It was a capital whose beauty and symbolism clashed with the demands of an empire in motion. Even as courtiers continued ceremonies and rituals within its palaces, the city's role shifted from administrative hub to symbolic capital. Gardens flourished, fountains ran, and halls echoed with ceremony, but the pulse of imperial activity, the movement of armies, the execution of campaigns, the management of territories, was elsewhere. Fatehpur Sikri, magnificent as it was, became a city of echoes, a place whose grandeur could no longer anchor an empire stretching beyond its reach. Its walls, designed to convey control and inspire awe, now enclosed a city increasingly disconnected from the expanding world around it. Walking through the city today, the tension between ambition and practicality remains palpable. The courtyards and streets hint at ceremonies once performed under the emperor's watchful eye, while the isolation of the surrounding plains suggests why military necessity ultimately overshadowed spiritual inspiration. Fatehpur Sikri tells the story of an empire whose reach eventually outgrew its carefully chosen capital, a reminder that even the most visionary rulers must negotiate the limits of geography, logistics, and strategic reality. The city's magnificence endured, but the demands of empire were shifting, and Akbar's gaze was inevitably drawn toward new frontiers where Fatehpur Sikri could no longer anchor his expanding dominion. Fatehpur Sikri's decline did not come with the fanfare of war, rebellion, or natural disaster. There was no siege, no fire, no sudden catastrophe that marked its end in historical records. Instead, the city's disappearance from the heart of the Mughal Empire was quiet, almost imperceptible. The court simply left. Over months and years, officials, courtiers, and the imperial family gradually abandoned the red sandstone palaces and marble halls, relocating to more practical centres of power. The echoes of ceremony, debate, and ritual faded, leaving behind a city that still radiates grandeur but resonates with emptiness. This phenomenon is strikingly unusual in imperial history. Capitals are rarely abandoned without dramatic cause. Rome fell to invaders, Delhi burned, Constantinople succumbed to conquest. Fatehpur Sikri's emptiness, however, was a deliberate, almost bureaucratic decision, a slow migration dictated by logistics, climate, and strategic necessity rather than conflict. Chroniclers of the era, who meticulously recorded battles, treaties, and dynastic intrigue, gave little explanation for this silent exodus. The reasons they do mention are often practical: water scarcity, isolation, and the inconvenient location relative to the empire's expanding frontiers. Yet they do not convey the human experience of leaving a city so intentionally designed, a capital that embodied an emperor's vision, faith, and authority. The departure was gradual. Palaces that once hosted daily audiences and ceremonies became empty rooms echoing with the faint smell of dust and marble. Gardens withered without constant care, fountains ran dry, and corridors that once carried the footsteps of courtiers and royal women fell silent. Rituals that had once enforced hierarchy and loyalty became memories engraved in stone carvings, untouched screens, and latticed windows. The city's precision, once a tool of control and spectacle, now served as a haunting reminder of its abandonment. Walls stood intact, yet they enclosed no one. Terraces and plazas remained grand, but void of human life. The silence of Fatehpur Sikri also speaks to the ephemeral nature of imperial ambition. Akbar had poured vision, ideology, and wealth into this city, blending faith, power, and architectural genius. Yet even a ruler of extraordinary skill could not overcome the combined pressures of environment, logistics, and empire-wide politics. The desert's challenges, the scarcity of water, the remoteness, the extreme climate, were immutable. While armies, administrators, and pilgrims came and went, the city itself had no means of sustaining the population required to animate its grandeur. The court's departure was the only practical response, yet it created a rare historical anomaly, a capital of unmatched ambition left intact but largely unexplained. Walking through Fatehpur Sikri today, the effect of the silent departure is almost palpable. Courtyards stretch empty beneath blazing skies, balconies and corridors echo with imagined conversations, and the grand audience halls stand as monuments to a civilization that abruptly vanished from their walls. The city is not a ruin wrought by violence. It is a ghost city, preserved by time and sandstone, a testament to both human ambition and human limitation. Fatehpur Sikri reminds us that history does not always announce its turning points with fire or battle. Sometimes the most extraordinary events occur in quiet withdrawals, in the gradual, almost imperceptible shifts that leave cities standing but hollowed. In this silence, Fatehpur Sikri tells a story more profound than conquest or defeat. It speaks of vision confronted by reality, of grandeur outpaced by practicality, and of an empire that moved forward while leaving behind a city of dreams. There is no drama in the departure, only the haunting beauty of absence, and in that quiet, the city's true legacy is revealed, a capital conceived in ambition, abandoned in pragmatism, yet immortalized in stone. Once the last courtiers and servants left Fatehpur Sikri, the city did not crumble or fall into chaos, as many abandoned capitals do. There was no destruction, no pillaging, no flames to erase its memory. Instead, it was frozen in time. The red sandstone palaces, marble halls, intricate jali screens, and sweeping courtyards remained untouched, their craftsmanship intact, as if the city had been paused mid-breath. Fatehpur Sikri became less a ruin and more a monument, a silent, preserved testament to Akbar's ambition and the extraordinary vision of the Mughal Empire. Unlike other abandoned cities, which are consumed by decay or repurposed by successive civilizations, Fatehpur Sikri seems to have been deliberately left alone. There is a strange intentionality in its preservation, almost as if the desert itself recognized its importance. The very absence of inhabitants became its protection. Dust settled in empty courtyards, sunlight glinted off unpolished sandstone, and the faint sound of wind through empty halls replaced the bustling life that had once defined the capital. The city, though devoid of people, retained its presence, commanding awe and curiosity centuries after it was left behind. Every structure stands as it was meant to be seen. The Diwani casts, the hall of private audience, glows in the sunlight. Its marble inlays and carved pillars remain pristine. The palaces retain the intimacy of court life, the private chambers hinting at the lives once lived within. Gardens, though touched by the desert's dryness, preserved the layout and geometry that symbolized harmony and imperial order. Even minor details, from ornamental fountains to intricately carved doorways, survive intact. Fatehpur Sikri is not just architecture. It is a moment frozen, a living memory trapped in stone. This preservation is remarkable in historical terms. Most abandoned cities eventually yield to nature or human reuse. Buildings crumble, roofs collapse, walls are dismantled, and streets vanish under new growth or urban expansion. Fatehpur Sikri defies these patterns. Its remoteness shielded it from large-scale looting, and the desert's climate, though harsh, slowed deterioration. The very environmental challenges that made the city difficult to inhabit also helped preserve it. In this sense, the desert became a custodian, maintaining the city's grandeur for centuries to come. Walking through the empty streets, one can imagine life resuming at any moment. Courtyards seem ready for ceremonies, fountains poised to flow, terraces awaiting the emperor's procession. Yet the silence is total. The city is suspended between history and memory, between ambition realized and ambition abandoned. Fatehpur Sikri exists as a paradox, a place of immense human effort and cultural fusion, yet untouched by subsequent generations, almost as if the world collectively decided to leave it as a perfect relic. It is a capital without rulers, a city without citizens, yet alive in its quiet resonance. Fatehpur Sikri's frozen state gives modern visitors a rare window into history. Unlike other sites reconstructed, rebuilt, or adapted over time, here, the city tells its story authentically. Every wall, arch, and corridor communicates not just Mughal power, but also the fragility of human endeavors, the interplay between ambition and environment, and the enduring beauty of a vision once brought to life. In its preservation, Fatehpur Sikri bridges centuries, allowing us to witness the grandeur of an empire paused, a capital forever frozen in time. Centuries after Fatehpur Sikri was abandoned, the city did not fade quietly from the imagination. Instead, it became fertile ground for myths, legends, and whispered stories. Chroniclers and local lore wove explanations for why Akbar's magnificent capital had been deserted. Some claimed the city was cursed, abandoned because divine displeasure had fallen upon the emperor for overstepping spiritual boundaries. Others suggested that astrological miscalculations, unfavorable alignments of planets at the time of its founding, had doomed the capital from the start. These stories, half cautionary tale and half mysticism, offered a narrative to explain what historical records left largely unexplained, why a capital so perfectly built could be so swiftly abandoned. The legends of Fatehpur Sikri are as compelling as its architecture. One persistent tale describes the city's decline as the result of angering the Sufi saint Salim Chishti, whose blessing had once guided Akbar to the birth of an heir. According to this myth, the saint's spirit withdrew protection from the city once imperial priorities shifted, leaving it vulnerable to nature and human limitations. Other local stories speak of spirits wandering empty halls and courtyards, guardians of a city suspended between past grandeur and desert silence. While these tales cannot be verified historically, they underscore the deep cultural memory of the city and its mystical significance to generations who passed by its empty streets. Yet beyond legend, modern scholars have examined practical and empirical explanations for the city's abandonment. Environmental historians point to chronic water scarcity, over-reliance on distant supply routes, and the limitations of Rajasthan's arid plains. Urban archaeologists highlight the logistical strain of maintaining such a large capital in a remote location, far from the empire's active frontiers. Political historians note that Akbar's military campaigns required a more centrally located capital, closer to emerging centres of commerce and governance. When these factors are combined, a picture emerges. Fatehpur Sikri was not cursed, nor fated by the stars, but challenged by realities that no architectural brilliance could fully overcome. Even so, myths persist because they speak to the human need to narrate the extraordinary. A capital abandoned without conquest or catastrophe is unprecedented, and the human imagination fills gaps that history leaves behind. Tales of divine displeasure, astrological doom, or supernatural guardians give the city a sense of narrative drama that dry logistical explanations cannot replicate. They also reflect the symbolic power of Fatehpur Sikri. It is a city born of prophecy and faith, designed to embody spiritual vision as much as political authority. That very origin invites interpretations that merge the mystical with the historical, creating layers of meaning that continue to fascinate both scholars and visitors. The persistence of mystery is amplified by the city's physical state. Walk among its empty courtyards and sunlit halls, and it is easy to imagine why imagination took over where documentation is sparse. The precision of its architecture, the emptiness of its ceremonial spaces, and the silence of its gardens encourage speculation. Each jali screen, each fountain, and each throne tells a story both of human ambition and human limitation. Myth and fact coexist, feeding the fascination that draws travelers, historians, and photographers alike. Fatehpur Sikri has become not just an archaeological site, but a canvas upon which human curiosity paints legends. Ultimately, Fatehpur Sikri's story is a blend of vision, environment, and imagination. Myths, curses, and astrological theories are compelling precisely because the historical record is incomplete, because the city's desert isolation invites interpretation, and because its abandonment defies ordinary explanation. The city's emptiness is a blank page upon which both science and superstition leave their marks. In this way, Fatehpur Sikri endures not only as a monument of Mughal ambition, but as a mystery that continues to captivate and confound, a place where stone, desert, and legend intertwine in perpetual dialogue. Fatehpur Sikri is more than an abandoned city. It is a monument to ambition, faith, and the complex interplay between human aspiration and environmental reality. Its red sandstone walls and marble halls tell a story that transcends time, a story of power at its height, vision at its peak, and the fragility that accompanies even the most meticulously constructed empires. Walking among its courtyards and corridors, one is confronted not only with the genius of Akbar's architectural and political imagination, but also with the limits imposed by nature, logistics, and human ambition. The city reveals how power can be both visionary and unsustainable. Akbar's decision to build Fatehpur Sikri was motivated by faith, prophecy, and the desire to unify a diverse empire under a singular cultural and spiritual vision. The city's layout, its ceremonial halls, and the integration of religious symbolism all serve to project authority and inspire loyalty. Yet, no matter how grand or innovative, the capital was ultimately constrained by water scarcity, isolation, and the practical needs of a sprawling empire. Fatehpur Sikri stands as a stark lesson. Even the most brilliant exercise of power can falter when human ambition collides with environmental and logistical reality. Fatehpur Sikri also offers insight into the role of belief and ideology in shaping imperial projects. The city's founding was entwined with prophecy and divine favor, demonstrating how rulers used religion not only as a personal compass, but also as a tool of governance. Akbar's efforts to harmonize faith through Dini Ilahi, his courtly rituals, and the city's architecture highlight how belief can be leveraged to create unity, obedience, and cultural cohesion. Yet these same forces that inspired creation could not guarantee sustainability. In Fatehpur Sikri, faith and ideology achieved grandeur, but could not overcome the immutable laws of nature and geography. The city's abandonment encodes a warning in stone. Empty courtyards, silent fountains, and pristine yet uninhabited halls all testify to the impermanence of even the most meticulously designed human achievements. History often records the victories of empires, but rarely does it preserve the echoes of their miscalculations with such clarity. Fatehpur Sikri's preservation offers a rare opportunity to witness both triumph and failure simultaneously, a tangible narrative of aspiration, oversight, and the limits of control. It is a capital that embodies both mastery and overreach, allowing visitors to reflect on the fine line between visionary leadership and hubris. Beyond lessons in power and belief, Fatehpur Sikri remains an architectural and cultural treasure. Its fusion of Hindu, Islamic and Persian motifs, its careful urban planning, and its aesthetic balance continue to inspire architects, historians and travellers centuries after its abandonment. Every jali screen, courtyard and palace remains a testament to human creativity and the ambition to impose order and beauty on the world. Yet the desert's silence reminds us that creativity, no matter how monumental, must contend with context, environmental, political and logistical. Ultimately, Fatehpur Sikri matters because it is a mirror of ambition itself. It shows how power seeks permanence, how faith shapes vision, and how even the most extraordinary achievements can be impermanent. The city is a monument not only to the glory of the Mughal Empire, but also to the lessons that arise when vision outruns practicality. Its red sandstone walls, empty corridors, and timeless courtyards speak across centuries, urging us to consider the costs of ambition, the limits of authority, and the enduring impact of human creativity. Fatehpur Sikri is, in every sense, a city that teaches, warns, and inspires all at once. Fatehpur Sikri stands today not as a ruin wrought by siege or fire, but as a city deliberately left behind, a capital abandoned by choice rather than destroyed by calamity. Its red sandstone walls, marble halls, and intricate courtyards still convey the grandeur of a Mughal vision at its zenith. Yet within that grandeur lies the subtle truth: human ambition, no matter how meticulously realized, must contend with environment, logistics, and circumstance. Unlike cities lost to catastrophe, Fatehpur Sikri did not collapse under external forces. It simply ceased to function as a living capital, leaving behind a city suspended in time, a monument both to achievement and impermanence. Returning to the question that framed this exploration, why did the Mughal Empire walk away from a city of such astonishing beauty? The answer lies in a combination of practical reality and visionary ambition. Water scarcity, logistical challenges, and the demands of a rapidly expanding empire all conspired to make the city unsustainable as a hub of governance. At the same time, the location's spiritual and ceremonial importance, tied to prophecy and Akbar's vision, had lost its functional priority. Fatehpur Sikri was never destroyed. It was intentionally left behind, a capital that had fulfilled its symbolic purpose and had reached the limits of practicality. In its abandonment, the city becomes extraordinary, not because of catastrophe, but because of choice. The city's silence speaks as powerfully as its architecture. Empty courtyards, still fountains, and pristine palaces allow us to walk alongside history, imagining the ceremonies, debates, and daily life that once animated its spaces. Fatehpur Sikri is both a testament to the reach of imperial ambition and a meditation on the fragility of human projects. It reveals that even the most magnificent constructions, born of faith, vision, and authority, are ultimately subject to natural laws, political shifts, and practical realities. In that, the city teaches lessons that remain as relevant today as they were 4 centuries ago. Fatehpur Sikri's enduring presence also challenges the way we think about history itself. Cities are often judged by their destruction or survival, yet here is a capital that survived in stone, perfectly preserved despite being abandoned. Its story defies ordinary narratives of collapse and conquest, reminding us that history is not always written in dramatic events. Sometimes it is written in quiet withdrawals, in the careful choices of those who built and then left spaces of extraordinary ambition. The city refuses to die because it was never meant to endure in the conventional sense. Its endurance is found in memory, in legend, and in the awe it continues to inspire. As we leave Fatehpur Sikri behind, we are reminded that history is as much about human intention as it is about circumstance. The city invites reflection on the interplay between vision and reality, power and practicality, faith and logistics. It is a living lesson in the ephemeral nature of human achievement and the enduring resonance of beauty preserved in stone. In its silent halls, we hear echoes of ambition, whispers of devotion, and the quiet affirmation that some cities, even abandoned, continue to speak across centuries. If this story fascinated you, consider joining us for more explorations of lost cities, forgotten empires, and the mysteries history leaves behind. Like and subscribe to the channel to uncover more stories that challenge our understanding of the past. Share this video with fellow history and mystery enthusiasts, and dive into our other videos where stone, legend, and human ambition collide in extraordinary ways. Fatehpur Sikri may have been left behind, but its story and its lessons live on for anyone willing to listen. Fatehpur Sikri stands as a remarkable testament to human vision and ambition. Unlike many capitals that fell to fire, siege, or natural disaster, this city was abandoned not because it was destroyed, but because the practical realities of sustaining it outweighed its grandeur. Akbar's decision to leave Fatehpur Sikri was not a failure in design or aesthetics. It was a strategic and pragmatic choice, dictated by water scarcity, the logistical challenges of governing a vast empire, and the evolving needs of a mobile and expanding Mughal state. The city had fulfilled its purpose, both symbolically and spiritually. It had been a stage for prophecy, religious experiment, and imperial spectacle, and once those functions had been realized, the practical demands of empire drew attention elsewhere. Yet, even in its abandonment, Fatehpur Sikri did not crumble. Its red sandstone palaces, intricate marble halls, and vast ceremonial courtyards remain intact, preserved in a way that few other abandoned capitals can claim. It is a city frozen in time, a living monument that allows us to step directly into the vision of one of India's greatest emperors. Walking through its empty streets and silent corridors, we are reminded that the story of Fatehpur Sikri is as much about human ambition as it is about human limitation. The city reflects the heights of Mughal ingenuity, the integration of faith, culture, and political authority into every stone and screen. Yet it also reflects the limits imposed by environment, logistics, and geography. Desert winds sweep across courtyards, fountains lie dry, and gardens await the touch of human care that will never come. These absences are not merely aesthetic. They tell the story of why even the grandest human projects, no matter how visionary, cannot escape practical realities. In that silence, there is a lesson for us today, that ambition, faith, and creativity must contend with the realities of the world we inhabit. The story of Fatehpur Sikri also reminds us how history is preserved not just in texts and chronicles, but in stone, in architecture, and in space itself. While some abandoned cities are forgotten or pillaged, Fatehpur Sikri was left untouched, almost intentionally, allowing centuries to pass without erasing the imprint of human ingenuity. Its empty halls speak of ceremonies, decisions, and daily life that shaped an empire, and yet they also leave room for imagination. Scholars, travelers, and historians can walk these streets and feel both the power and the fragility of one of the Mughal Empire's most extraordinary undertakings. In its preservation, it becomes both an object of study and a source of inspiration, connecting the past to the present in ways that few other monuments can. If this story has captured your imagination, there are more cities, more empires, and more mysteries waiting to be explored. By liking and subscribing, you can continue this journey into lost capitals, forgotten civilizations, and the remarkable tales history sometimes leaves incomplete. Share this story with fellow history and mystery enthusiasts, and explore our other videos where human ambition, culture, and environment intersect in ways that continue to fascinate and challenge our understanding of the past. Fatehpur Sikri may have been abandoned, but its story remains alive, echoing through stone, desert, and centuries, teaching us lessons about ambition, foresight, and the enduring beauty of human vision. History is full of places like this, cities that rose, thrived briefly, and then left behind more questions than answers. Fatehpur Sikri reminds us that abandonment does not equal failure, that preservation can speak as loudly as destruction, and that sometimes the greatest stories are told in silence. As you leave this city behind in your imagination, remember that every wall, every courtyard, and every empty corridor is a lesson written in stone, a lesson about vision, power, and the delicate balance between ambition and reality. Explore it, share it, and let the echoes of this city inspire your own journey into the mysteries of the past.